We go back to this chapter, so from the outset, we can see the crowds of people gathering. Jesus's reputation is, of course, spreading. He's like a big celebrity now, if we can call it in today's terminology. People they want to get to know him because he's preaching, he's healing, he's performing miracles. So what does he do? Any other person that actually is wants to be famous, would do something, would kind of like flirt with the crowds, and try to to be famous. But Jesus exactly goes the opposite direction, because he is Jesus. He is the Son of God and he's the Son of Man. He is there for a mission. So he begins to teach in parables. Actually, there is 7 parables in this chapter, 58 verses, in the whole chapter. Now, 4 of the parables, we can see they're focused towards the crowds, but 3 of them are focused towards the disciples. So we have Jesus applying, talking to different audiences already. It's a good lesson, actually. Sometimes, my wife, Beatrice, some of you might already heard about her. I used to be known as Pastor Julian. Now I'm better known here in the North as the husband of Dr. Beatrice Kastrati. But she tells me, and she reminds me all the time. She says, Julian, read the room. Read the room. So, and Jesus always knew his audience, and he applies different parables here for different audiences. And I think it's just amazing just to focus on that and to take that, to keep that in mind, because that helps us. It will help all of us, with the rest of the Gospel of Matthew. What are parables? I mean, they are short stories, right? They are allegorical. They are symbolic in nature. The idea is, you want to convey a deeper meaning, and that's why you employ them. We've seen Jesus kind of having a go at this earlier on, chapter 5, chapter 7, a little bit in chapter 9, but very, very short snippets, very short parables, actually. But in chapter 13, you get the full package. He resumes his style of preaching in this series of parables, and the idea is one single one that kind of binds them all. It's about the kingdom of heaven. It's about the kingdom of heaven. To use parables to describe such an incredible, lofty place, we can call it, the kingdom of heaven, right? It's Jesus's distant listeners, it causes them to think and process what he's saying, because what we notice here, there is a filtering mechanism by which Jesus is speaking to those who will believe after he's speaking, and those who, unfortunately and sadly, will not believe. There is a filtering mechanism. So, if you notice probably in verse 3, he begins the first parable, the planting seeds on different kinds of soil, right? 3 to 9, just take it as an example. I'm aware I need to finish in about 7 minutes or so, but there are the seeds that the birds that came late, then the seeds on the rocky ground, and then the other seeds that grow beside the thorns, they get choked up by the thorns, and then finally the seeds that fall on good soil, producing grain in various measures. Now, again, please remember, dear friends, Jesus's audience here is comprised of Jewish people who had been following him for quite some time now. They had spent some time, they had followed him. So it was a let's say, a consistent crowd, kind of like in an evangelistic campaign. I can imagine Pastor Bernie, Pastor Palmer, it's like they have been there for a while during your, seminars, your workshops, it's like, it's not the first night of the meeting. It's they've been there. So now Jesus goes to the next level and he's challenging them, and he uses this technique, and it's incredible the way he does it. So the crowd, it's time for the crowd to actually see what it's being produced in them. So it's really the crowd is the field there. So, and Matthew, the evangelist Matthew, right, who wrote this gospel, he is brilliant because he highlights this parable right there at the beginning of the series, because this first parable really is like kind of a mini summary. It's like that trailer before the series that you really, you want to watch, you want to binge watch, right? It's that trailer. This is that first parable. But again, remember, Jesus is saying here, well, basically his technique is to filter those who will believe in him, and from those that will actually really have no interest and are there just for other reasons and will not choose not to believe in him. So because there are different kinds of soils, because there will be different kinds of responses from people. Now we notice this in our everyday life. Now here, the ones that truly want Jesus to believe in him, they will produce well, they will grow fruits. So verses 10 to 16, then, and don't worry, I will not cover all 58 verses today, but I think we get the idea. And then once we establish that trend, then we can see and we can provide a key of explanation to the rest of the chapter. Jesus pauses here to explain why his teaching is in parables, because these disciples are confused, right? Didn't they ask him in verse 13? It's like, come on, said Jesus, why are you speaking to people in parables? It's a valid question, right? Or I mean, they're also confused in themselves. And the confusion concerning the parables is understandable. It's understandable because, when you take into consideration that the disciples didn't really yet know what Jesus is doing here with his sermon strategy. Sometimes you listen to a preacher like Pastor Julian is like, I start a little bit normally, I start with a joke or this or illustration at the beginning of the sermon. And some church members are wondering, what is he on about? Are we landing, Pastor Julian? This is probably what some of you are thinking right now. I'm just joking. But, it's that sort of that dilemma, right? So they are confused. Now, we are modern day students of the Bible, let's say, in the 21st century. Now we've had time at Jesus' rhetoric here and, see the purpose in it. But the disciples, so we have the benefit of hindsight. We have the Bible, the finished product in front of us. The disciples had no such luxury. They didn't know what to think about in that moment. They didn't really know Jesus for that long. They knew him, but not so long, right? Not for so long. They're probably thinking, why don't you just tell them what you want them to know? Why are you talking to them so metaphorically about truths that are as lofty, as mysterious as the kingdom of heaven, right? But Jesus has a reason, and this is, I think, the gist of it all. Parables prepare the unbelieving heart to start processing truths from God that require the Holy Spirit for clarity. I'm going to say it again. Parables actually prepare the unbelieving heart to start processing those truths from God that require actually the Holy Spirit for clarity. Jesus plants the seeds here. The seeds are really, these parables are seeds in themselves. The Holy Spirit really waters. The Holy Spirit waters them so to provide understanding. So there's a beautiful process taking place here, organic process. So no one really will be able to hear what Jesus is saying without God's help. Kind of like you need the Holy Spirit. We can't do anything really without the Holy Spirit. If Jesus were to tell them about God directly, the Holy Spirit would not have as much room to work and give understanding. See, it's a partnership here because the people would not be looking for understanding when they already think that they understand it. I think you get my point now. So parables actually increase the Holy Spirit's power to work in people's hearts. So in other words, if somebody hears a parable, doesn't understand it, then telling him or her directly will not profit him or her because he or she do not understand, do not truly understand it by God's Spirit, only in their earthly mind, so to speak. So hearing something directly is easy for anybody to understand. But if the Holy Spirit is involved, dear friends, brothers and sisters, then one can both understand it directly and through the parable. So Jesus here is telling the parables first. Again, remember, it's a filtering mechanism. Jesus is sifting through the people who will eventually believe in him and those who will eventually will not. The ones on God's side, right, and those who will choose not to be on God's side. And these two opposing forces he's aware of, and we have, it's been established earlier on in the book of Matthew. We have seen them throughout, the two sides. And this is the reality. This is the reality, and Jesus goes all the way, and he admits to it in verse 35. He refers the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables, and I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. And that is basically he sees that being fulfilled. And so Jesus reveals everything slowly in a way that makes his listeners slow down to process. I'm known to be a fast eater, Sister Joanne, and that's not good. I eat food very fast. My wife, she eats very, very slowly. She processes the food much better. And it's probably just that there's a tip there for us to process things, to take our time as we process things. And this is exactly what Jesus is doing. But to skip to the point, we want to pray today. This is the prayer breakfast after all. It's important that we get this, we get the general gist of it, what Jesus is trying to do here. He's explaining, even when he talks later about the kind of soils, how it correlates to the person hearing. He gives them the explanation later to the disciples, right? Remember, a little bit later, there is a call to action there. Jesus wants his followers to understand that following him from place to place, like you have done now, he says, that's not enough. Thank you, you're for following me. But now it's time to decide. There comes a point, there comes a decision-making time. He's saying, listen, you need to decide. Are you going to believe my words, or are you just going to follow me as you would follow a celebrity? Not everybody in the crowd would have gotten this, however. So only the ones who really wanted Jesus, and the same applies today to, how we really genuinely want to follow him or not. Or we just, we're just doing it because it's safe or it's trendy to do so. Only the ones who wanted Jesus would be able to feel that conviction, a desire to believe his words, the ability to understand it, right? Like in verse 23, he says, as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruits and yields, and in one case 100-fold, and another 60, another 30. So, they've been following again Jesus for so long. Are they going to let Jesus' words take root in their souls or not? And this is a dilemma, and this is a challenge, brothers and sisters, and I'll stop there. This is the challenge for us. We are actually that soil today, even 21 centuries later, and that's where it stays with us. And that's a dilemma. We've been now for a while, together. Are we going to go to the next step? And Jesus certainly encourages us this morning to go to the next step and embrace him and allow that organic, beautiful partnership that necessitates the Holy Spirit. So I'll stop here. And